Hey everyone, my name's Jesus Gringo, coming to you from my back cave in Mexico City, and this video is titled MAGA, the oxymorons of Free Karen Read. Now, I want to be clear. The reason I didn't want to do any of this kind of video while Karen Read hadn't won her court case is you don't want to fight with your allies. When it comes to politics, I don't care what you say, I care about policy. The laws you pass, whether they help us or hurt us. I don't care if you wear a flag pin. I don't care if you say the Pledge of Allegiance. You can do both of those things and then go in a back room and gut our Medicare and our Social Security. It doesn't make you an American just because you do those things. So, what I cared about with Free Karen Read was whether or not these people actually believed in freeing her, and they did. So, during the trial, there was no reason to fight with anyone, from the smallest contributor to the biggest, like Turtle Boy. Basically, leave them alone. I made a comment here or there on Twitter, but I wasn't like, let's just go attack these people nonstop that we need to help get her freed. So I just want to be clear. During the trial, making these types of videos, I consider very, very counterproductive. But now that she's freed, we got to expose these clowns like Howie Carr, Grace Curley, Jessica Machado. Jessica Machado is quite possibly one of the most racist people I've ever seen in my life. She can't shut up about immigrants, being rapists, while she completely supports Donald Trump, his 26 sexual assaults. The fact he was Epstein's best friend and confidant. Trump's a kitty diddler. She knows it. She just hates immigrants and the transgender more than she hates Trump. That's what Jessica Machado's principles are. And that's why I bought jessicamachado.com. She tweeted one day that some random caller called into a radio show and threatened Trump. So I replied to her, Trump said during the 2016 election against Hillary, if he lost, people would have to use their Second Amendment remedies to prevent Hillary from appointing judges. He also started the January 6th insurrection. So don't talk to me or act like you give a single shit about people making threats or that kind of stuff. You don't. You care about yourself, Jessica. Oh, you were so outraged that that woman was going to lose a shelter bed and her kid wouldn't have somewhere to sleep, when it's cold out. So what'd you do when Trump gutted Medicare? He's shutting down rural hospitals. He's gutting free lunches, food stamps. Did you speak out once against any of that to prevent the suffering of that same woman? Of course you didn't. You're a fat fuck with zero principles. I am also a fat fuck. The difference between you and me, I know an immigrant puts the food on my table when I'm in the US. I don't demonize the people who do the back-breaking work in the fields. Brutal heat. No shade, limited water, slave wages, getting contaminated with pesticides that are going to give them cancers later. And then you're like, get rid of them all, get rid of them all. You going to go pick food on the farms, Jessica? No, of course you aren't, you fat fuck. You're not going to do a goddamn thing about that. So shut the fuck up about how much you hate immigrants and them getting public defenders. You're just a disgraceful racist. There's nobody in Boston I despise more than Jessica Machado. She's not a journalist. She's a propagandist. The minute something comes to her attention that shows Trump is a million times worse, she blocks you on Twitter so that nobody else is going to see that comment I made either. That's the kind of person Jessica Machado is. So again, that's why I bought jessicamachado.com, and I'm just going to annihilate her, absolutely annihilate her racism on there. So when anyone ever Googles her name, that's what they're going to see first. But I digress. We're now going to get into what I consider to be the three major tenets of the Free Karen Read movement, how Trump is magnitudes worse than anything we've seen in Norfolk, and yet they've got these laser eyes. Oh, I can see everything in Norfolk, every tiny drop of corruption. But Trump does it, and all of a sudden it's see no evil, hear no evil, and we're not going to speak about what Trump's doing because we hate immigrants and the transgender. Because that's it. There's nothing else Trump is doing that's going to benefit anybody's life in America. Nothing. Gutting Medicare and shutting down rural hospitals isn't making America great again. It's make America suffer like it's not suffered since the Great Depression. But anyway, let's go through what I consider to be the 3 tenets of the Free Karen Read movement. So, there are 3 basic tenets of Free Karen Read. Number 1 was, if they can do it to Karen, they can do it to any of us. So, if we let them prosecute this woman unfairly, then we're all at risk of being prosecuted unfairly. And that's true. But what I'm going to show you in terms of what Trump's doing, and that being a threat to the American people, is so much worse. Magnitudes, another universe of a threat. Crickets. They won't say one word against the dear leader, not one, even though what he is doing to civil liberties is putting us on the verge of truly being a fascist country. So that's number 1. Number 2, people who followed the Karen Read case are outraged by the corruption in Norfolk County. They say it's reprehensible and so obvious. They can see every minor detail in that corruption, but they can't see the corruption I'm going to lay out about Donald Trump. No, of course they can see it. They hate immigrants and they hate the transgender. That's about it. They're willing to overlook magnitudes worse corruption, a magnitudes greater threat to everyone's civil liberties, just because they don't like immigrants and they don't like the transgendered. And then number 3, people are outraged about the $1 million wasted on the special prosecutor Hank Brennan and the Aperture kindergarten experiments. It's an outrage to the Massachusetts taxpayers. And that's only trial 2. That doesn't even include trial 1. Well, what I'm about to show you is Trump costing the taxpayer millions and millions of dollars. And in his case, it's going directly into his pocket. And what do they say? Crickets. Crickets. They don't say a word. This has all been available information since 2016. Some of it didn't happen until he actually took over. But we've known about most of this in terms of the corruption. So let's go and deal with point number 1. If they can do it to Karen, they can do it to any of us, right? Trump threw 50 Venezuelans who came here legally. They filled out the forms. They crossed the border legally. They never violated a single immigration law. So what did he do? He threw them in a gulag in El Salvador, where they have been tortured ever since. It is illegal under U.S. law to send somebody somewhere where they're going to be tortured. That's why they made the deal to get them out of that prison. They claim, it was a prisoner swap for some American prisoner in Venezuela. That's not why they did it. Trump is immune. The Supreme Court gave him immunity, but his little fascist worker bees, they are not immune. By sending those people off to a country where they are tortured, they are all liable for what they did. So they had to bring them back. So about 240 Venezuelans were imprisoned in El Salvador's horrific terrorism prison on March 15th. A subsequent CBS News investigation found that 75% of the men on that list had no criminal record. Now, I want to be clear. No one's saying you can't deport them. Biden and Obama both deported magnitudes more people than Trump did in his first term. The difference is they followed the Constitution. They followed the Constitution. This is a statement from the New York Bar Association. You think the New York Bar is full of a bunch of hippie liberals who, just want to let everyone go free and have free love? No, they're serious lawyers. And they are calling out the unconstitutionality of Trump sending people in black masks, unidentified, to round people up without probable cause, a search warrant or an arrest warrant. They just roll up and throw people in vans. Then they throw them in a concentration camp in Florida where they don't give them a phone call and they don't give them the right to call a lawyer. I mean, can you imagine claiming you're outraged by what they did to Karen Reed? You know what Karen Reed got? She got an arraignment. She got a lawyer. They held 2 trials and allowed her to present the evidence that eventually proved her guilt. There was one U.S. citizen whose parents were from Mexico. When they arrested him, he had his real ID on him, the one that proves you're a citizen. And they're just like fake, and they threw him away in some kind of holding cell. Now, if they had put him on that plane, what's his habeas corpus? How does he stand before a judge and say, no, I'm here legally? They threw those people there because the president of El Salvador isn't going to let anybody in to visit the prisoners. He doesn't let any human rights groups in because of what he's doing to them. So basically, if they can throw an immigrant on one of those planes and not have them pass before a judge, and then have them end up with basically a life sentence in a foreign jail in a country they've never been to, they can do that to you. And that is magnitudes worse than what Norfolk County did to Karen. Karen got a lawyer. Karen was arraigned. They had a grand jury, and she got a trial. These people are thrown in camps in a hurricane zone in Florida. What's going to happen when there's the next hurricane? What are they going to do for those people? They can't get them out in time. If it passes that way, the death and carnage is going to be off the hook. Nobody cares. So again, here's the statement of the New York City Bar about ICE agents wearing masks. The New York City Bar Association, the City Bar, views with alarm the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE officers' new practice, wearing masks and otherwise obscuring their identities when conducting detentions and arrests. We now have body cams on cops because of all the shenanigans, all the violations, all the beatings they were given to innocent people. They can handle it. They show their faces. So why can't ICE? Because what they're doing is unconstitutional and illegal. And then if they beat somebody up, because we don't know who's who, there can be no accountability. Everyone talks so much during Free Karen Reed about the lack of accountability. Well, guess what? If you can just show up a bunch of guys in black masks, throw people in a van, disappear them to El Salvador, there is no freedom in the U.S. Habeas corpus goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. It's the most important thing. Nobody's saying they can't be deported. When they say they deserve legal protections, habeas corpus, due process, they're not saying that means an immigrant can never leave. Obama and Biden deported more immigrants, and they didn't violate any of the Constitution. They did it legally. Trump's doing it illegally and unconstitutionally. That's the difference. If that guy that had the real ID that they threw in jail was one of the people they threw on the plane to El Salvador, we would have never known he was there. They wouldn't release the list, and that was an American citizen. So for you to be like, oh, if they can do it to Karen, they can do it to us, while you go like this and you go like this, when Trump has got fascist thugs in black masks concealing their identity, because if they're concealed and then somebody dies or somebody ends up in a foreign prison that they shouldn't, they're not keeping logs of who made the arrest. They're not saying who did this, who did that. You know how outraged Free Karen Reed was? Just at the fact we didn't know who supposedly found the taillight pieces at 34 Fairview. They're outraged. There's no chain of custody, nothing. We don't know who found those pieces. But they're okay with ICE agents in black masks, completely unaccountable. They can do whatever they want to people. They can violate their civil rights. They don't have arrest warrants. They don't have search warrants. Most cases, they don't have probable cause. They're just brown people that are being arrested. You know, I'm 52. When I grew up, they used to make fun in movies all the time about communist Russia and East Germany? Papers, please. Papers, please. Because everyone wanted to live in a free country. We didn't want to walk around being asked, hey, prove to me you live here. That's not freedom. None of you believe in actual freedom. Immigrants aren't a threat. Immigrants that are documented commit a quarter of the crimes that Americans commit. And they commit, or undocumented immigrants commit half the crimes. Do you go around labeling all white people rapists because Trump was found guilty of sexual assault and 26 women accused him? Do you call white kids monsters because they go shoot up schools? No, you separate the bad ones from the good ones. When you label all immigrants as these just dirty predators living off the tit, it's the most American hypocrisy of all time. One American in the field, or one immigrant in the field, busting his ass in the brutal heat with limited water, limited shade, just getting contaminated with pesticides is more valuable than every Republican politician put together. That immigrant is putting food on your table. The Republican politicians with the flag pins saying the Pledge of Allegiance just went in a back room, gutted Medicare. It's going to cause rural hospitals to shut down. They want to take away your Social Security. They're making deals to ruin your life. They came in and said they can dump more crap in our water. When Trump came in the first time, he undid an Obama ban on pesticides that triples the rate of autism in kids. Is that making America great? No, it's making his donors happy because now they don't have to clean up their horrible, horrible chemicals. So, again, back to the New York City bar. In this light, the decision to begin concealing the faces of law enforcement agents who are carrying out arrests and detentions appears to be an effort to evade accountability and to decrease transparency in response to increasing allegations of government overreach, abuse of power, and violation of constitutional rights. You're so outraged Norfolk County violated Karen's constitutional rights with a malicious prosecution, but throwing people in a van, then flying them down to El Salvador to be tortured when 75% came here legally? Again, if you say Obama or Biden let them in legally and Trump's against that, I am not saying you can't deport them. But you bring them in front of an immigration judge, you explain your case, and then if they agree, that person gets deported. If that person can prove, no, this is a real ID, I'm a real citizen, you can't deport them. And you can't deport the one guy they deported, who they brought back, because there was a judicial order saying he could not be deported to El Salvador. He was at risk of being killed by the gangs there. They did it anyway. They ignored the courts. They tried to ignore the courts and say, we can't bring these guys back. What happened? They brought Garcia back. I think that's his last name. So he's now in jail pleading his case, habeas corpus. And the other people they dumped there, they traded with Venezuela to get like some prisoners of ours released, which I have no problem with, but they never should have been in El Salvador in the first place. The reason they ship them there is because then they're not accountable for what they did. 75% were here legally. You can deport them, throw them in a gulag in El Salvador, potentially for life? No, no, no. That's as anti-American as it gets. So anyway, that's all I'm going to really discuss about the bar. I just wanted to point out that very, very, very competent lawyers are against having people show up in black masks and throw them in vans and say, you're in a jail in Florida. They can't call a lawyer. No one knows they're there. They can't talk to anyone. They're just stuck there. And a lot of them are probably very innocent and shouldn't be there. The only way they get to prove that is if they get habeas corpus, which they've been denied. So don't tell me, oh my God, if they do that, if they do that to Karen, they can do it to all of us, when you don't give a shit when they're doing it magnitudes worse to magnitudes more people. So then part two, was, of the tenets of Free Karen Reed, was how much everyone can see how corrupt the Norfolk DA is. They could see every tiny little bit of corruption, like they got eagle eyes. MAGA Barbie defends Trump to the death. She claims she could see all that corruption. But you can't see why Trump appointed Pam Bondi? You know why she appointed, or why he appointed Pam Bondi? When she was Attorney General for Florida, everyone was investigating, all the states were investigating Trump's fraudulent university, the one he paid a $25 million fine for ripping everybody off. They were investigating that. Pam Bondi went to him and said, hey, give me $25,000 for my campaign. He did that illegally from his charity. He stole from his charity to make that payment. He's a billionaire and he can't, contribute directly. It's got to come from his charity. What a cheap bastard. But it's also illegal. But that's the reason he appointed her. Can you imagine, like, if Turtle Boy saw that the reason Deval Patrick, let's say he appointed Morrissey and Morrissey didn't have to run, and the reason he was appointed was because Morrissey solicited $25,000 not to investigate some wrongdoing that Deval Patrick did? Do you think for a second Turtle Boy wouldn't see that corruption? You're telling me here? She was a prosecutor for 20 years in Florida. She accepted $25,000 from the Donald J. Trump Foundation while her office was considering joining in on the class action lawsuit against Trump. Trump created a fake university run by fast food workers. They knew nothing about real estate. He made people load up their credit cards with high interest credit card debt. So I want to be clear. Let's say, for example, Trump had a real university and he actually taught people really good secrets. If you load up some retired couple or some veteran with $30,000 in credit card debt, you know what they're not going to get? A loan to buy real estate. It was a scam, even if it wasn't a scam, because if you load people up with debt they can't pay off, they're not getting any real estate or anything they could learn about real estate because they're not going to be able to buy any. No one's going to give them a loan if they got $30,000 at like 20% interest. They're not getting anything. He stole from those people. And so Pam Bondi was like, hey, you give me $25,000, I'm going to look the other way. And she told her office not to join the settlement. So again, can you imagine if that happened between Deval Patrick and Morrissey? Do you think anyone in MAGA wouldn't see that corruption? So I'm legitimately asking all of you, why do you claim you can't see that? And you know what? It gets even worse. In his first term as president, Trump made Acosta the labor secretary. He was the guy in Florida who gave Epstein the sweetheart deal that makes no sense. He protected all the co-conspirators. No one negotiates a deal where they're getting off and saying like, look, I'll give you this for information, blah, 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 and then I'm going to cut you a deal. That guy, Acosta, said nobody who did anything with Epstein can ever be prosecuted because of his agreement. And he knows nothing about labor. So why did Trump appoint Acosta as labor secretary? Because Acosta covered up the fact Trump is a kitty diddler. Trump was Epstein's best friend for a decade. Epstein called him his confidant. We have the videos where they had a pageant with underage girls that wasn't a real pageant. It was just Trump and Epstein and a bunch of underage girls that they were obviously gonna bang. A 14-year-old girl has accused Trump of rape. You know, Free Karen Reed likes to talk about Sandra Birchmore was just brutalized. She was raped, you know, when she was underage. They passed her around. What do you think Trump and Epstein were doing with all those underage girls? That's why he made Acosta labor secretary. It was a, hey, thank you for covering up the fact I'm a kitty diddler. Can you imagine if Morrissey had done something like that? Or one of the, well, we do know that the detectives did it, and so everyone's outraged about that. But my point is, what if we could prove that Morrissey gave one of these detectives a better position or a raise to cover up the pedophilia in the Sandra Birchmore case? Every one of you MAGA free Karen Reeds would see it in a second, but you can't see that Trump went to on Epstein's plane 7 times. He knew he liked them young. There's that letter that he wrote him where they talk about the secret they have that they can't talk about. Yeah, that's kitty diddling. That's what that secret is. And I guarantee every one of you MAGA clowns, if that happened in Norfolk County, would see it. Why can't you see it when it's Trump? Is it just because you hate immigrants and the transgender that much? Because that's how I see it. There's really no principles there if you're willing to overlook what Trump did. Pam Bondi took a $25,000 bribe from him, and Acosta covered up the fact he's in those Epstein files. Is that not magnitude's worst corruption? Of course it is. So why can't you see it? I could wait all day and none of one of you could give me an actual answer that would make any sense other than you're using cognitive dissonance. Like, I hate corruption in Norfolk County, but for some reason I don't hate it with Trump. These two things are in conflict, but I'm just going to ignore it because I hate immigrants and the transgender so much. It's just repulsive to me. Absolutely repulsive. But let's continue. The third thing I said was that people are outraged by the $1 million that has been wasted on Hank Brennan as a special prosecutor and those kindergarten clowns throwing blue paint at a car and charging the Commonwealth $500,000. That is horrible, horrible corruption. It's a huge waste of taxpayer dollars. Disgusting. So why aren't you concerned that Trump has stolen tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money? This is an article from The Guardian. U.S. taxpayers have shelled out tens of millions of dollars for Trump's golf trips. You know what the difference between Trump and every other president is? Trump goes to his own properties 500 times. He brings his staff with him. He charges them for rooms, meals, drinks, and golf carts. That greedy asshole charges the Secret Service to rent the golf carts they need to protect him on the golf course. Every single time he flies to one of his properties, he puts money in his pocket. Bush didn't do that. Clinton didn't do that. Obama didn't do that. Biden didn't do that. You know, I couldn't stand them blah, blah, blah about vacations, you know, that Obama took. Obama took magnitudes less vacations than Bush, and Trump took magnitudes more vacations than Bush took in his first term. What's the difference? Trump's the only one right in front of your eyes. He flies to his property. He probably makes 50 grand, 100 grand every single trip between all the rooms, the drinks, the golf carts, everything right in front of your eyes. Tens of millions of dollars have been stolen from the U.S. taxpayer. You can see the $1 million in Norfolk County, but you can't see the tens of millions of dollars that Trump has stolen right in front of your eyes. And you're like, make America great again, while the greatest presidential con man in history, the only one who's ever profited from his own vacations, does it right in front of your eyes, and you can't see it? No, they see it. They definitely see it. Again, the best reason I can give him is they hate immigrants and the transgendered. He's doing nothing else to make anyone's life better or anything in America great again. So that's it. But you honestly want to tell me that you can't tell when he goes to Mar-a-Lago that he's putting money in his own pocket? And it's not just the vacations to the White House. You can't put campaign contributions in your own pocket. So what did he do? He held his campaign events at his properties. And then he always overinflates the prices beyond what the General Accountability or Accounting Office, the GAO, says we should be paying for a nightly room. He charges us for those rooms more than he charges actual people who want to stay there. It's just a con. Steal the money right out of our pockets. Tens of millions of dollars. Oh, I'm so outraged. Look at this money going to waste in Norfolk County. Oh, Trump's stealing tens of millions every single time he goes to one of our properties. He just keeps adding, just keeps his pockets overflowing. And you honestly want us to believe you can't see that? No, you see it. You're liars. You're liars. You're liars. If you actually cared about that kind of abuse of taxpayer money, you could still support Trump if you hate, X, Y, and Z about Biden. I am a firm believer in the lesser of two evils. So let me give you a quick example. A lot of people will like to point and say, if politician A does this and B does this, then they're equally corrupt. That's not how it works. So I'll give you the example of Gaza. Both Biden and Trump are responsible for the genocide in Gaza. They're both responsible for that. So you don't say that makes them equal in everything. It's like an algebra equation. Trump's on this side, Biden's on this side, you cross the two off. The lesser of two evils means Biden wasn't going to give the rich a giant tax cut and then cut Medicare for the poorest people among us. He wasn't going to get rid of school lunches. He wasn't going to cut food stamps so hungry kids starve. That's how you do the lesser of two evils. You cross off everything that's basically the same, and then you look for the differences. So there may be something under the lesser of two evils where you prefer Biden or you prefer Trump, like you hate immigrants, you hate the transgendered, you think a transgender girl playing in girl sports is going to cause more harm to the country than the poorest of us being kicked off Medicare. That's fine. You want to say that? You do that. I'm not going to fight with you. But at least that would be honest. But when you're like, I cannot stand the abuse of taxpayer funds, and Trump has done it magnitudes worse, you don't care about corruption. You don't. You just don't. So let's continue. Trump settled the Trump University lawsuits for $25 million. And one of the things he did, let me see if I can find it in here. Let's see, I had it before. Or it might have been in the other article. But he took $100,000 from the Trump Foundation charity to pay the legal bills of Mar-a-Lago. He got fined for that. Why does a billionaire need to pay from a charity if he's a billionaire? Because he wasn't a billionaire. He was barely getting by. He went bankrupt 7 times because he's the most incompetent businessman of all time. He bankrupted a casino because he constructed a second one when they're like, that's going to cannibalize the first one. He's so stupid, he did it anyway. So he has been committing fraud. He stole from one charity to buy the painting of himself. I think it was $10,000. He stole like $100,000 to pay his legal bills. So he ended up having to pay a settlement, and they ended up shutting down his charities because they're so corrupt. Like, you really think liberals made him take $100,000 out of that charity to pay his legal bills? Really? You think it's their fault? The story's fake? They persecuted him for no reason? You think he said the reason he paid the $10,000 for his portrait out of the charity was because no one else was going to buy it. He's a billionaire. Bust out the checkbook and buy the picture. Don't rob a charity. That's as corrupt as it gets. Stealing from charities to buy paintings of himself, to pay his legal bills. I can see everything in Norfolk County. Look how corrupt these guys are. Oh, it's Trump. I'm blind as a bat. Can't see, can't hear, can't talk about it. Because you're clowns without actual ethical principles. You don't have any. If you did, you'd despise Trump. Not only that, everyone knows Trump is a draft dodger. And when asked about, which foot of his was bad, He's like, I don't know, it might have been both of them. He couldn't remember because his dad got him out of Vietnam. And then what does he do? He wastes $25 million of taxpayer money to throw himself a birthday party with, all the military, the tanks, whatever, the planes flying over. He's a draft dodger. You know what else he did to make that parade possible? He made the Vietnam veterans, for the first time in like 30 years, not be able to have their event at the wall in Washington, D.C., so he could have that birthday party for himself. $25 million of taxpayer money to throw himself a birthday party. I'm outraged. $1 million spent on Hank Brennan and an expert. Oh, $25 million spent on Trump's birthday. MAGA, make America great again. Trump's our guy. It's because you don't have ethics or principles. Period. This is so easy to prove. It's like a joke. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. So here's the article. Trump used the charity money to buy his own portrait because nobody else would. Why can't a billionaire just pay? Why did he have to steal from the charity? Like, do any of you have any self-awareness to even think about why he would do something like that? Because he's corrupt as they ever get. For his entire career, Trump would make contracts with people and then just refuse to pay them. And then after a long enough time, he would basically try to settle for pennies on the dollar. He stole from the people doing the work for him. You think he's there to fight for you when he was willing to steal from the workers? There was one case where the judge was like, I'm going to take your property and give it to these people if you don't pay. And then he finally paid. Like, it took that long. People bust their ass, contractors, and then he just stiffs them and walks away. He didn't pay like the bill for security in a lot of the cities that he went to from his campaign funds. He's supposed to pay that. He just stiffed them with multi-million-dollar bills on security for his rallies. Really? You're outraged by the $1 million in Norfolk County? We're probably at least over $100 million in what Trump's stolen from the taxpayer, from his workers. Can't see it, can't hear it, don't want to talk about it. Because you don't have ethical principles. That's why I call you the oxymoron of Free Karen Reed. Like I said, I don't think Biden's some great guy. He has a lot of problems, like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. They're corrupt. They're not as corrupt as Trump, and they weren't going to gut Medicare and shut down rural hospitals to give rich douchebags another tax cut. That's why you vote for them, not because they're perfectly uncorrupt people, but because they're less evil than Trump. I think 16 million people are going to lose their health insurance because of Trump gutting Medicaid. Is making America great again forcing 16 million Americans in the richest country on earth to die horribly painful deaths so rich people can keep more of their money? If that's what make America great again means to you, you're a goddamn idiot. You're just an idiot. So on top of that, Trump used to make, I don't know if he's still doing this, when they would fly over to Scotland, the Air Force guys always stay on the base. They don't have to pay to stay on the base. Sometimes they have to stay in hotels, but they're hotels near the airport. Trump made 6% of them go 20 miles away, and then he overcharged what he normally charges for the rooms so that the Air Force is putting money in Trump's pocket. No other president has ever done that, ever. By far the most corrupt we've ever had. I've already laid it out, and I want to say I'd be willing to go on anybody's YouTube channel that wants to defend their belief that they believe in Free Karen Reed and that they also support Donald Trump and that there's no cognitive dissonance or no conflict in their beliefs. I will shred you. I will not call you names. It will be an honest civil debate, but I will make you look ridiculous. I have all this stuff just stored in my brain. I don't need to pull it up. I'm showing it to you because otherwise people would say, well, he's just pulling that info out of his ass. I got it all in my head. I don't need to show you this stuff. I'm doing it to prove that he's actually done it. It's been well documented, and you're all just ignoring it while claiming, oh my God, if they can do it to Karen, they can do it to us. I can't believe all the money Norfolk County wasted on Hank Brennan and the bullshit expert. Like, I'm outraged. Oh, Trump has stolen probably $100 million from the taxpayer or taxpayers. Crickets, crickets, crickets. So anyway, let's continue. We got here. Trump had to agree to shut down his charity because he stole from it. It was blatantly obvious. That $25,000 he gave to Pam Bondi, he gave from his charity. A charity can't give a political donation. So not only is he bribing her not to investigate him, but he's also using money for charity that other people donated to charity to give to her, not to join the investigation and settlement of Trump U. And you think Pam Bondi is a fighter for truth, justice, and the American way? You know why she lied that she was going to release the Epstein files? It's because she was specifically hired to never do that. She already took the bribe from Trump. That's why he knows she's not going to prosecute him. That is why she is Attorney General, because she's as corrupt as he is. So for all of you to sit there and whine, oh my God, Morrissey is so corrupt. We can't have this. We have to do something. Oh, Pam Bondi took $25,000 for Trump not to investigate him. Can't see it. Can't see it. I guarantee if that was Morrissey, every one of you'd be screaming from the rooftops that you could see it. So again, I'm just going to pose the question to you. Where are your ethics and principles? I just documented a damning case of Trump's civil rights violations that put us all at risk, denying people habeas corpus. He is as corrupt as they come, definitely more corrupt than any other president we've ever had. Like Biden, when he was a senator, they called him the senator from MBNA, and he fought very hard to get that bankruptcy bill passed. It's the reason students can't discharge student loans in a bankruptcy. Like, you have to pay that for life. Even if you're stuck with a bill you can never pay. And Biden's largely responsible for that. So I'm not a delusional guy who says, oh, Biden is perfect and Trump. I'm not on Team Biden. I'm on the side of the people who are going to pass bills that help the American people or do the least harm to the American people. That's what lesser of two evils is. I'm not deluded. I don't think Biden's some great guy. Biden's the reason that Clarence Thomas is a Supreme Court justice. When the Anita Hill hearings happened, he stabbed that woman in the back. There were multiple women willing to come forward that he was a dirty sexual pervert, Thomas, and Biden covered that all up so he could become a Supreme Court justice. So again, I'm not saying Biden is some great guy, but I've already shown you he wasn't going to do that tax cut and gut Medicare. He just wasn't going to do that. He doesn't fly to his own properties and put the money in his pockets. He deported magnitudes more immigrants than Trump did, but he didn't violate the Constitution. He did it legally. He gave them due process, and he gave them habeas corpus. That's why you vote for Biden, and Kamala would have been the same. Like when she was in California, her office had Mnuchin dead to rights on mortgage fraud. They were about to prosecute him, and she took money from Mnuchin and then overrode her office and didn't prosecute him, which sounds a lot like Pam Bondi. But again, when you're dealing with lesser of two evils, the Pam Bondi and what she did, they cancel each other out. So you look for the lesser of the two evils. Kamala Harris wasn't going to gut Medicare and make 16 million Americans suffer with horrible illnesses. She wasn't going to gut food stamps so kids go hungry. That's the difference. So I want to be clear. I'm not some left-wing nut who's afraid to criticize the Democratic Party. 100% I will criticize them every time. It comes down to policy and who's going to either do the most for the American people or going to do the least damage. And the amount of damage Trump is doing right now, those tariffs, that's a tax on the American people. The companies don't pay them, we do. And now they're running around going, we're going to give Americans a rebate from the tariffs. Yeah, you created the tariffs. You never should have done it. So to give the money back because you just crippled the poorest Americans among us doesn't make you a hero. It makes you an idiot who's trying to undo the idiotic thing he did. It doesn't make you a good president. It makes you a jackass. So anyway, I think basically that's it. I think I've laid out the case good enough that if you're claiming you're free Karen Reed and you're MAGA and you're saying it at the same time, you have no idea how goddamn stupid you are. Those two things are in complete conflict with each other. If you want to delude yourselves, you know, human beings are great at cognitive dissonance and rationalization. We don't want to feel stupid. We don't want to feel like we're hypocrites. So they tend to bury this stuff in the back of their minds so that they can go around on a day-to-day basis and be like, hey, I'm not a hypocrite. I can support Karen Reed and support Trump, and there's absolutely no conflict. Well, there is, and I proved it. And again, I want to be clear. I will go on anybody's show that wants to claim they can be MAGA and free Karen Reed without having a giant moral and ethical conflict that literally can't be resolved. I won't call you a name. We'll debate strictly on the facts, and I will make you look ridiculous. I will make you look absolutely ridiculous. I actually know how to debate, and I know what I'm talking about. I didn't pull random nonsense out. I pulled out legitimate facts to prove all of you clowns that claim you're free Karen Reed and MAGA are probably the most idiotic hypocrites of any Americans that have ever lived. Anyway, if you like the video, hit the like and subscribe buttons. I will see you in the next one, and thanks a lot for watching.